Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder of Streamlined Properties and the team leader of Streamlined Properties on Market, brokered by eXp Realty. Whether you are looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
This is episode 17 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, John Casmon. John, welcome to the show. I'm going to read you in a second, but I wanted to say hi first. It's great to have you.
Jonathan, it's great to be here. Excited to be here on your show today and excited to talk to all your wonderful listeners.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So this is a little bit about John. I have actually been on his podcast, which we'll talk about, but John launched Casmon Capital Group to help busy professionals invest in real estate without taking on a second job. They have helped families invest in close to $90 million. That's at the time of this bio. It's probably more now in multifamily apartments to create passive income, reduce their tax obligation, and foster generational wealth. I love that term. John is also the host of Multifamily Insights, which used to be called Target Market Insights, in case you're familiar with that. Again, and I was on, episode 356, and I loved it, so I had to get John on my podcast. So, John, how did you get your start in real estate investing? That's a great place to start.
Yeah, so listen, I started with a duplex. We house hacked, which is living in one unit, renting out the other. And then from there, we slowly started to scale a smaller multifamily property. But really, you got to start before that, because what led me to actually get that to you? I was working in corporate America, and I worked at General Motors, and this was from 2007 to 2011. So I was there when we went through the last economic downturn. And I was at the company that was one of the companies on the forefront of all the things going on. So you talk about bankruptcy, you talk about layoffs and all those things, right? We had the car czar, we had the bailout, all that kind of stuff was going on.
Everything.
Right? So I'm working at one of the biggest companies in the world that's going through this situation. And I'm watching my leadership team on CNN and Fox News and all of these channels. And meanwhile, they're telling me to keep my head down. And what really happened is there was a day where they were going to do a massive round of layoffs. It was just Armageddon type day. So I came in as late as possible without really getting in trouble for being late. Yeah. And I had a voicemail waiting for me on my desk. And I remember just like my heart was pounding. I had been told the night before not to worry about it. I was good. I was reassured completely. But I was just like, oh, man, what is this? Because no one ever leaves a voicemail, right? Like even back then, you had a cell phone. They would call your cell and text you or something, right? No one left you a voicemail on your office phone. So anyway, I picked up the message, and it was actually one of my colleagues, and he had been let go unexpectedly. And he actually sat in front of me. And he just went on a little bit of a rant. And understandably, he had been there for 22 years. You can retire at 30 with the golden watch and all that kind of good stuff. And he didn't have a plan B. And that was the trigger for me. Not immediately in that moment, but that started the cadence of, oh, man, this really sucks for this guy, and I feel a lot of empathy for him, and I hope he's able to figure out his life and situation to get his job together. Yeah. But on the same note, I was fairly young in my career, and I'm like, you know what? I don't think this is the path I want to commit to. I don't want to be the guy who puts in 20, 25 years or even 30 years, and then someone taps me on the shoulder and says, my time is up, right? That kind of led me down the path of saying, okay, what else can you do? What else? How else can you make money? How else can you take care of your own future?
Yeah. So you're
into real estate.
Your first thought was alternative income, but were you interested in real estate as an entity before that? Or was it something that looked like a good way to make that alternative income and then you got obsessed with it afterwards?
I was. The first time I was interested in real estate was when I was in college. I knew or I'd heard that many people make money in real estate. In fact, I learned at that time that most millionaires make their money in real estate. So I knew real estate was something to get into. I just had no clue as a college student how to get started. As a matter of fact, I remember coming home one summer, and that was my goal. My goal was to start investing in real estate. I thought you did that by getting a newspaper and looking at properties for sale and seeing if you could buy one. I had no money, by the way, because I'm a broke college student. So I had no idea what I was going to do if someone said yes. I didn't work any of that stuff out. At about 6 weeks of that, I was like, yeah, okay, this plan has some holes in it. I went away from it for a while. But that's when I went through the bankruptcy situation, and my career actually flourished. I did really well during that time frame. But it enabled me to start putting together a plan slowly to say, okay, how do you invest in real estate? And I started spending more time reading blogs and getting on Bigger Pockets and attending different events where I could to learn how to be a real estate investor. And reading books was really key for me at that time as well, because that was one of the key ways to get that information.
Yeah, I'm seeing something that we've seen with other guests that's so important is you didn't decide you wanted to invest in real estate and then just leave the job that's making you money. You stayed there so you could create the capital that could then be put into real estate. Don't you think that's something that I guess newer investors or people who are just eager to invest at any level need to know? Like, you still have to keep the capital coming in until you know that you can generate it. It's why it's so important that you kept working and learning at the same time without trying to jump too quickly.
Absolutely. And I think too, for a lot of people, especially those people who want to quit their job and be in real estate full time, take a moment and really understand what you're solving for. For me, in my situation, I was trying to insulate myself from the unknown, right? Layoffs, bankruptcies, just, again, politics. I just didn't want to wake up one day and have someone tell me I'm not their guy. Figure out your life. Right now, I'm here scrambling. That was my goal. So when I got into real estate, the first goal was to supplement my income. As I progressed, the goal became to replace my income, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I can have that financial freedom, the flexibility, all that stuff. It's really important to clarify those things, because if you don't, you could wind up with a second job. And that's a really important thing that people don't understand. It's great to want to get in real estate, and it's great to get out there and get some rentals or some flip properties. And maybe you want to get your hands dirty and do it yourself. But if you work a 40 or 50 hour a week job, and then you work nights and weekends on real estate, you've picked up a second job.
Yeah.
Yes, you've got some equity and you're building wealth. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about that. But be clear on what you're doing. Because if you are a professional, you're a doctor, a lawyer, something like that, full-time professional, and your way of getting into real estate is by flipping houses or managing your rental portfolio, your time is way more valuable than sitting here doing these things. And that's why the different strategies are so important, because you can't invest in real estate without being a landlord, without being a flipper. And it comes down to where you're at in your life. For some people, absolutely, you got to flip, you got to wholesale, do what you got to do to make it work. But if you're a person who really just wants to see your money grow, and it isn't necessarily about quitting your job, it's really about, hey, I want to pull money out of the stock market, or I want to make sure I'm investing in long-term wealth building strategies, then this is a strategy you need to be thinking about, investing in apartments, syndications, deals like that. That's the way you want to be moving forward.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I think people get confused about what passive income in real estate really means, because don't you find that there's not much in real estate that's passive other than really syndications where you're not in charge? But flipping is the least passive investment there's ever been. So is landlording if you're not outsourcing it and then you have to pay for it. So, I mean, I think it's a really dovetails with what you said perfectly. Like, you can't just go in. Who wants two jobs? And who wants to go to what they think is their dream job and then be working more than a 9 to 5 because you realize, well, now I really have no hours, so I have to work 18 hours a day instead of clocking in and clocking out. It's a great point.
And even if you love real estate, like most people who love real estate still don't love being a landlord. Like, you don't want to get those phone calls. Yeah, no one loves that. We love finding deals. We love putting a deal together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
exactly.
part's good. I just don't like when everying breaks or people need stuff. It's hard.
And listen, inevitably, for me at least starting out, every time we went on vacation, I would hold my breath. Because I feel like we're about to go out of town. I know I'm going to get a phone call while I'm at the airport. Oh, the furnace went out.
7 months, everything's fine. The second you go to Hawaii, everything, there's a leak, a major leak, of course.
Exactly, right? And listen, you deal with it, right? You've got to plow through it. It's part of the business. You want to put your resources in place. But again, the whole point is just make sure you have a game plan. Know what your goal is. Because I will tell you, if your goal was just to make a little bit of extra money or put your money to work, and you find yourself dealing with floods in the basement or some tenant that's going irate, you might look at yourself one night or spouse if you're married, and they might look at you and say, what in the world are we doing? Like, how do we get here?
Yeah.
And that's one of the worst feelings to be in, is when you are literally in a situation, a messy situation, and trying to figure out, am I actually worse off than I was before I started this? Or
I thought
what?
this was supposed to be fun. How did you know when you got to the point? Was it a strict income replacement calculation for you? Or was there a point where I always feel like there's a point where you have to take a little bit of leap of faith, where the money hasn't lined up, exactly the way you want, but you can see that it's going to. Where were you when you got to that point where you knew I could leave GM and I can do this full time?
So I left Detroit. I left General Motors in Detroit, and I moved to Chicago to work at an agency. And that move was really strategic because I also wanted to start investing in real estate. So that was 2011. And I felt at the time like I couldn't really invest in Detroit. And part of that was just fear. I didn't know any investors. Anyone I knew who owned real estate in Detroit was trying to sell their real estate. Yeah. So it was like, I think I should try to just move completely.
Detroit would be obviously, now from all your experience, that would be a tough market to start in, just because of all the options that are there. There's so many different options and types of buildings, neighborhoods, and what you can get into. And there were so many foreclosures that you could really get yourself wrapped up being confused as to which investment portal you're really making there.
I think what's a really important lesson, I think this is really true today, is that people always get excited and they have this revisionist history and they say, oh, you could have cleaned up and made so much money. I'm going to tell you what. I was living in Detroit at the time and looking to get started. And if you don't have that experience, it's really hard to be confident when all around you is fear. Okay. Yeah. If there's blood in the streets, you're worried about where the blood came from. You're not worried about, oh, this is a great time to make some money. You're like, no, there's a killer on the loose. Let me get out of here. Yeah. So that's the mentality. And I say that because you're seeing headlines right now about the economy, inflation, interest rates. It's a lot of scary stuff. I've respected peers who are talking about how bad it's going to be. And I don't know if they're right or wrong. What I will say is we are always looking for opportunity. And what I learned at that time is I wasn't prepared enough to take advantage of opportunity. I didn't have the experience. I had some education, but not enough. So I had to move to Chicago and I had to start watching the data. And once I saw it start to improve, I was able to pull the trigger. And part of that also was because I house hacked. That is such a phenomenal strategy to get started because
so good.
I looked at it to say, look, I'm paying this guy $1,500 in rent. If I move over here and buy this 2-unit, I'm going to live in 1 unit. I'm going to rent out the other unit, and I'm going to have to pay basically $400 out of pocket. I'm saving $1,100 in my mind, regardless of what happens with anything else. In my mind, I was going to be saving $1,100. We created a ton of value. We actually created about $200,000 worth of equity in that property. So that was a signal to me that, oh, this works. So to go back to your original question, at what point did I make the leap? That first property gave me a lot of confidence that, okay, this thing does work. It's not just the books. It's not just some weirdo guys on podcasts. Mm-hmm. It's not some random guys.
That's
in the
us
basement.
now, by the way. We are the guys on podcasts.
Yep. Yeah. I'm the random podcast guy. There's not some weird dude on Bigger Pockets in his basement just posting about this stuff. It's real. It's legit. I saw it with my own eyes. I see it in my own bank account, right? So now it's how do I scale? And we bought a 3-unit building, which is our first full rental, right? Because the house hack I cheated, which is fine. You can cheat in real life.
It's a good cheat.
It's a good cheat. You can cheat in real life. The 3-unit was my first true rental. So now the rents had to cover the expenses. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, it did. It worked out really nicely. Then we bought an 8-unit, which is our commercial property. And around that time, once the 3-unit, quote unquote, worked, that's when the wheels were like, all right, this works now. We've proven out the theory or the thesis here. How do I scale this? How do I roll this up? How do I get this to the point where I'm not just relying on how much money I've saved for my day job, but I can build a business and I can transition, like you said. The 8-unit was a strategic purchase to get me into commercial, to get me managing a property manager, because I'd only managed my own properties at that point. And what was supposed to happen was I was going to flip some properties as well, generate some more money. I was going to buy a couple larger apartment buildings, and then I was going to quit my day job and run off into the sunset and continue building this massive portfolio. But that's not what happened. I'm sure you want me to talk about that in a second.
Absolutely. It never goes exactly the way that we thought it was going to go. It sounds good, but tell us what happened, because I know it's going to be interesting.
Was savvy enough to know that I really didn't want to flip, and I wanted to focus on multifamily. So I partnered with someone who was a flipper, and they weren't just a flipper. They were more of a builder. Mm-hmm. And they were doing all sorts of properties on the north side of Chicago, northwest side of Chicago. They were taking these bungalow houses, chopping off the top of them, adding a full story, second story addition, and just re-gutting the whole property, new electric, plumbing, everything. So just doing everything in the property. I walked through about 4 or 5 of the properties that he had done. A friend of mine had partnered with him, which is how I got introduced. And we ended up deciding to partner with him. In that process, there were some red flags that I just missed. And this is a lesson I want everyone to understand. I made the right decision in partnering with someone. I just picked the wrong person to partner with.
Yeah. Do you think it was because you were so eager to flip, which is like how people could have made the mistake that you almost made in Detroit by being eager? You missed that one, but you got another one because you were in this scale mode. How can I do multiple things at once? Do you think there could have been a right partner then and it would have worked out fine?
For sure.
Yeah.
The red flags were clear. And what happened is, so I'm big on education. And the one lesson I will tell everyone is, just because you don't have experience doing something or a track record doing something doesn't mean that you're not knowledgeable. If I read and I listen to experts talk about how to do something or how they've done something, and they all tell you a certain way that they've done it, and you meet someone who's doing it completely differently, you should pause and ask more questions.
Right.
So I was a big fan of Jay Scott. I just had Jay Scott on our podcast. He's become a guy that I've gotten to know pretty well. Yeah. Jay Scott's the guy who wrote the book on flipping houses. So
love that book.
My flipping knowledge really came from that book. And the 70% rule, which is big on bigger pockets, was another thing. Well, I get into the deal, and that's the first thing, is like, this wasn't the 70% rule. It was more like the 87% rule.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, man, where's the rest of the profits? How are we doing this? And again, I basically ignored my intuition because this guy's got more experience.
Did they make you, I think in that context, a lot of those people will make you feel like, hey, you really don't know what you're doing yet. And then we say to ourselves, maybe I don't know. Maybe they're right. Even though you knew, just like you were saying is right. You take the knowledge from books, and obviously you still need to do the application phase. But there's a lot of stuff process-wise. Like I find Jay Scott's book is like the best book for the actual process of flipping. I just ignore the numbers because the numbers can change from area to area. But the process of what you do and the percentages is so online. Like you said, you did know and you were right. You just got convinced out of it at the beginning.
Yeah, you asked a question about picking the right partner. Here's what I would say. There needs to be a mutual respect and a mutual appreciation for what each other brings to the table. And I remember there was a similar question like that I asked him at one point, and he told me, oh, don't worry about that. It's not important. And that should have been my pull the rip cord. I'm out of here. And I will tell anyone, if you're going to work with somebody, if you are worried about it, then they should be able to explain to you why it's not a big concern. Because it is a big concern for you, and they should just be able to break it down and say, hey, we've got this in place or that in place, or we've thought through that. That's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear, don't worry about it. Right?
That's a partnership.
That's a partnership. But even even if you're passive, right? If you're an LP in a deal, if you're looking to invest with somebody, or even if you're looking to loan money to someone, like you don't want to hear hey, don't worry about that part. We got it covered, or that's not a big deal. What I want to understand is, then explain to me why I shouldn't worry about it. Explain to me why it's not a big deal. That's the meat of it, right? You should be able to explain that, because what I'm hoping is I'm not going to sit here and be able to know everything, right? Even if I'm your 50-50 business partner, if you're running the day-to-day of the flip, I don't know every single conversation you have with the contractor, with the electrician, with every person who's coming into contact with the project. So what I'm banking on is that you are the right person to help navigate this whole situation.
Yeah.
And if you tell me not to worry about something, it makes me worry even more.
Yeah.
So needless to say, you can see where the story is going. And bottom line is we lost money on that deal, and it derailed my grand scheme. So I had to stay in the job a little bit longer. But we did start to syndicate larger deals. And what ultimately ended up happening is I felt in order to really grow that business, I needed to take the leap because it was slowing us down. And while I had to replace my income, I felt that in time I could.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, we had started to replace the money I lost on those flip projects and some of the bad deals. But the goal was like, hey, we just make money doing this real estate stuff, and I can slowly ease into it because I have so much passive income coming in. But what ended up happening is I ended up having to pay for some of those deals with my day job as opposed to making money on those deals.
That's why it's so important, though, to just buy your time. And I really feel like it worked out perfectly with what you said. There is a moment where the income's not matching up yet. But one, I like this a lot better I see more scale in this than staying at a job that's going to give me incremental increases by a percentage each year. And you have to take the leap and count on the education that you've done. I'm obviously a big book person too. I think anyone who's interested in real estate investing and really wants to learn is going to, one, build relationships, two, read a lot of books and listen to a lot of podcasts, and hopefully see a lot of properties before they start bidding. How did you build out the business to get where you are now, which is large scale deals? What was that process like? And tell us like what you do now, the scale of your deals.
Yeah, so we've helped investors or partner with them on over $100 million worth of apartments today. And really, in order to make that transition, a couple things had to happen. One, I had to see it. I still have to believe that this is possible. Again, no offense to the bigger pockets people posting, which I'm one of them and have been one of them, to the podcasters, which I'm one of them, right? To these authors of these books. But I don't know those people, right? So it wasn't until I got to know people actually in this space and doing the game like this where it became real. And the biggest thing for me was, one, getting a coach or a mentor. That helped tremendously. I also watched that coach or mentor grow their portfolio and was able to ask questions and saw how some of the strategies and techniques that they were using were helping them to grow their portfolio. Launching a podcast was huge for me. I'm actually an introvert. A lot of people don't really believe me when I say that or understand it, but I was a shy kid, like super shy kid. And I came out of my shell a little bit, but I'm an introvert. I'm not the guy who's just networking around and shaking hands and I know everybody and it's easy to raise money. So for me, it does take a little bit more work. So putting myself out there was really important for me to be able to build relationships. And this is the key thing. And I'll talk about this in a moment as well. But the key is understanding how to raise money and how to attract capital for deals. When I started out, in my head, people were going to do me a favor by investing with me and I was going to ask them for money for deals. That's where I was coming from. I was like, okay, I know what I can bring to the table. Maybe if I can get people to invest with me, then I can go and buy bigger properties. It's a very selfish, self-serving mentality.
It's also not that strong going out, right? Because I know that's where you're going. Because if you don't have the confidence, you're saying like, I'm asking someone and instead of telling someone, listen, I have something that's a really good investment. You can invest or not, but like it's going. Is that what happened? You adjusted the dialogue and had more confidence in terms of what you...
It took a minute because the first thing is you've got to believe in it. So I tell people all the time that there are 3 C's to attract capital, right? And the first C is confidence. And the confidence can't be fake hubris. This isn't a fake it till you make it. This isn't like, you got to really believe in this. And let me break this down. Anyone listening to this understands that people work with other people's money, OPM, to do deals. What I'm talking about is you have to truly believe that you can help other people. And by helping other people, that means understanding what their challenges are. That means that you have confidence in your ability to execute and deliver for them. When I hear people tell me that, they don't want to raise money for their friends and family, that's a big red flag. Why? Yeah. If you believed in your deals, if you truly believe that you were doing everything possible, you could deliver strong returns, and you were going to put together a great team, why in the world would you not go to your friends and family and ask them to join you? First. Or at least give them the opportunity to join them and let them make their own decision.
Yeah. And why would you prefer strangers?
Right.
Because they don't know you. That makes no sense.
Because you don't have the burden. So to me, that's a red flag. And if you feel that way, ask yourself why. Because if I think about it, if you were Elon Musk and you were launching something, you're telling me Elon wouldn't go to his friend and say, hey, man, I'm about to launch this next huge thing. Right. You want to get in at the ground level with me, right? Anyone who truly believes in what they're doing, they're going to go to the people around them and give them an opportunity. Yeah. I'm not saying you got to go sell them and convince them, but you should at least let them know, hey, I'm doing this. I am inviting other people to join me. If it's something you're interested in, I'm happy to share more. Right. You don't have to go with a hard sales pitch, but I'm saying that you have to have the confidence in what you're doing. And if you don't, it's a red flag to yourself, not to me. It's a red flag to yourself that maybe you don't truly believe in what you're doing. So you got to ask yourself, well, why not? Why don't I believe in this? Why am I not confident enough to go to the people I love most and offer this solution to them? So confidence is key. And that confidence comes from putting in the work, educating yourself, getting to the gym, the mental gym, right? So whatever it takes for you to get better at this, the books, the podcasts, the events, the mentoring, the coaching, all of these things help you build confidence. So you have to have that confidence before you start talking to other people. The second C is credibility. What is going to give people confidence that you can actually deliver on this? Is it you yourself? What is your background? So for me, I was in corporate America before I was building this real estate portfolio. I had some success in corporate America. I helped to lead the Buick brand to be one of the fastest growing brands in America. I've been recognized as one of the top advertising and marketing professionals in the country. So while it wasn't necessarily real estate related, I had some corporate America wins that people saw and they said, I know John's pretty good at this, and I'm pretty sure that translates. I oversaw 7 different marketing agencies to help build our campaigns. So when you talk about project management, that's a skill that I had that's transferable, right? So what do you have? When it comes to real estate specifically, what do your team have? Who's your property manager? Who's your mentor, your coaches? What experience do they have? What partners do you have? Like, why should we feel confident that your team is credible to go out there, find great deals, and be able to execute these deals? So that credibility is key. And it's not necessarily based on just your own experience, but you can leverage credibility as well. The third C is connections. Most people rely on their friends and family, which I think is a great place to start. But again, you might say, I don't want to talk about friends and family. Again, I still believe you should start there. But the important thing is to find the people who want what you have to offer. Because the reality is, people in your family and friends, they're not all clamoring to invest passively in real estate deals, right? Whether it's you or anybody else, it's just not what all of them are looking to do. But we talked about bigger pockets. We've talked about real estate meetups. We've talked about podcast listeners. But what do they all have in common? They have an interest in investing in real estate. So if you can find the people who are looking for this message, who are interested in these opportunities, it's going to be much easier for you to attract capital. So those 3 C's, confidence, that's something you can't fake. You've got to actually put in the work. Credibility, that's about your experience and the team's experience. And then connections. Who do you actually have these connections to, and making sure that they're actually looking to invest in real estate?
Yeah, I love those. All like building philosophy. You have to build at each one of them. Connections are so important. We know this from real estate investing. Everyone thinks, oh, the country's so big. Real estate investing world is very small. You know, people who do things the wrong way, you can find out pretty quickly. And I think that's an important thing. Who are you building relationships? One thing I wanted to drop back on, which I think is interesting, you talked about hiring a mentor or a coach. I always say, and I want to get your opinion on this, that the best time to hire a coach isn't when you're brand new, because you really don't know A from B. It's when you have enough going that you want to take that and move that to the next level. That's the ideal time to hire a coach. Is that when you got your first coach or mentor? And is that what helped you scale it out?
Jonathan. Yeah, you're spot on. That's exactly what happened. I mean, we hired our coach and mentor, and I say something very similar. It's that, one, mentors are not magicians. So don't think that hiring a mentor is going to solve all your problems. But you want to be really clear on what you want to fix or what you need help with. For me, at the time that I hired my coach, I had built a $1.5 million portfolio. That sounds impressive, but it was really just 13 units, right? It was a 2-unit, a 3-unit, and an 8 unit. So I'd done 3 deals, right? But it was worth $1.5 million. So I had some traction. I knew where I wanted to go, but I also was very clear on my biggest problem. My problem was raising money. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to structure the deal. I was concerned that I might mess up. And because I'd only used my own money up to that point, what I was doing was fine. But if I've got to give 50% of the equity to someone else, these deals get a little skinny then at that point, right? If I'm only going to make 2% or 3% return, wait a minute, this is a lot of work to make just a little bit. Yeah. So I needed to change. I needed to change how I underwrote deals. I knew I needed to change, like, how do I even talk to the people in my network? And that's what I wanted to solve was, how do I actually go out there and open myself up to raise capital for these deals? I needed to get better at the deals themselves. But quite frankly, if it was just going to be me, I never would have hired a coach. I would have just kept doing what I was doing. The other thing for me was, like, there's a saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I was not actively looking to hire a coach. What happened was I closed on that 8-unit in November. I think in the month leading up to that, I had sat down with a good friend of mine, and I watched her go from 3 units to 9 units to 90 units. Again, coming back to networking and having these personal relationships. She ran a meetup. I came to the meetup all the time. So we would talk every month, right? So I saw her go from 3 to 9 to 90. And I said, whoa,
that's a big jump.
Go from 9 to 90? That seems ridiculous. And I asked her if I could take her to breakfast. I just wanted to learn a little bit more. And I fully expected her to tell me that, like, her great grandfather passed away and left $10 million or something crazy like that, right? Yeah. She's no, she had these investors from California who had been reaching out to her. And she finally decided to partner with him. And they provided the funding. She found the deals, and these are our partners.
Was
and
that like an aha moment? Oh
so
my
that
goodness.
was like literally the month or two before. That was like August or September. November, I closed on the 8 unit. December, I come to Cincinnati, and I'm trying to meet with people, and I meet with the guy who became my mentor, and he told me he had a coaching program. And I'm like, oh, man, look at this. He's in a city that I'm familiar with and trying to grow in. He's got a coaching program. I think this is what I need to do. So it aligned very serendipitously for me. And I think that's really important, is that even going back to the flip projects that failed for me, I had a life coach, and he would always talk to me about failing forward. And I'll tell you, when you're in the middle of losing, you don't want to hear that stuff, man.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, I'm paying you to tell me this is going to be worth it in the end. I'm like, man, you are wasting my time. I'm already broke now, losing my money on these deals. So I was just upset, and I couldn't really understand it. But his points were so true. You got to be able to take the risk. And yes, bad things may happen, but you are going to learn from them, and you are going to build confidence. You are going to get the experience. And sometimes the worst case scenario does play out. And then you realize, you know what? I can think of some even worse cases after that. Yes, I lost money on those flip projects, but guess what? We managed a few flip projects. We got them done. We built some contract relationships, and I learned how to screen potential partners better. So all of those things help you in the long run.
And that's leveraged risk too. Because you had partners, your loss burden is lower. It's annoying because you could have had a better partner, but like you're not footing the whole bill on some of those losses. So there's some ways that partnership can save you in the long term. Awesome. As we scroll into the end parts, I want to ask you a few of these questions to get your opinion. We'll see if you're ready, John.
All right.
Here we go. Your number one greatest influence in real estate over your career. Was it a person, a program?
It's really difficult. If I'm being honest, it's difficult not to refer to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think that book was just so revolutionary in its simplicity of how money works and how real estate can help you achieve their financial goals. So I've got to go there.
I feel like it's so motivational too. I read it every couple of years because it just reinvigorates me. Even though I know everything that's in there, it's like the dichotomy of the story is just so relevant because it's like our brains could go either way. Do you want to be rich dad? Do you want to be poor dad? And sometimes you're acting like one or the other, and you have to figure out which one you really want to be.
The thing for me that stood out is everyone always talks about real estate, and don't get me wrong, real estate obviously is a big takeaway. The thing that really jumped out to me, though, was there's a part where he talks about you should work for experience and to gain skills, not necessarily just for a job title. And that jumped out to me because I was in corporate America, and that was part of what I was considering. Like, yes, I could continue to climb the ladder and be a VP of marketing or be a CMO and maybe someday, but I would never own that, right? So when I felt like, okay, you know what, I feel like I've checked this box, let me move on to something else. That actually gave me the confidence to say, I think I'm good being on the corporate side. I want to go to the agency side. I want to move to Chicago. I want to do some other things. And my family looked at me like I was crazy because I walked away from a great corporate job at a company car. I mean, I was a young professional. But that book and that insight really gave me the lens to say, okay, I think I know what kind of path I want to go down.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, here we go. Let's see. What is wrong with the real estate investing world right now? Besides interest rates, that doesn't count. What's something out there that you see? And you go to a lot of conferences, you speak a lot. What's something that you see as like just a negative over the real estate investing world in general?
There's a FOMO component that I think is really challenging for people. They feel like they have to be doing a deal, or they feel like they're behind. And I would say you have to run your own race and make sure you understand what your goals are. And you have to focus on what you're doing. Don't worry about what the next guy's doing. Don't worry about what they have in their portfolio or how many deals they've done. Figure out what you want to do based on the lifestyle you want. And if you're not where you want to be, that's fine. But be honest with yourself. And then take the appropriate steps to get you further, whether it's hiring a coach or a mentor, or maybe you need to underwrite more deals, or maybe you need to partner with someone. But focus on the action, not necessarily just comparing where you're at compared to somebody else.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Fear in general can make you make terrible decisions. And the fear of missing out on something makes you pick bad deals or makes you move too fast. Like you could have chose Detroit, but you're smart enough to say, you know what, I don't think I get this market yet. I'm going to wait a little bit. And I think that could have saved a lot of people. If you do the bad first deal, you never recover because it just takes the glow that you thought was going to be there off of it. Yeah, that's an awesome one. And now going back the other direction, what's one way that we could all collectively make the real estate investing world better?
That's a great question. I would say for me, there's a particularly commercial real estate, but real estate in general, I think that there's an air of, I don't want to say confidence. It's almost just overconfidence. And I think some people really think that they are better than others. What I mean is, like, for a newer investor, they make it difficult, right? If you don't speak the jargon of the language, brokers won't really share deals with you. They won't take you seriously. It's hard to break in if you don't really know what you're doing just yet. It's very difficult to come in and kind of get situated. So I think that's one thing, is just it's a little pompous at times, or elitist is maybe a better word. And I'm not talking, it doesn't matter if it's commercial, wholesaling. I think that some people reach a certain level of success and they put on this elitist almost show. And I know some very well-off investors who are super humble and down to earth. And I would just say, I think that's one thing we could use more of, is just be a regular person and you don't have to I don't care how many deals you've done, like, that shouldn't change how you interact with people.
Yeah. And I think that's why, like, your podcast, my podcast, a lot of the podcasts that we listen to, that gives that there, because then you realize you can tell how somebody sounds on a podcast. Like now, because ours are on YouTube, they can see us. They can know, these guys actually know what they're talking about. It makes it a little bit more real, instead of the books are great, but you're reading it to yourself. Or you're listening to an audiobook. There's no dialogue. And I feel like with podcasts, you feel like you're part of the conversation. I feel like people can nod along and understand. So just taking a quick stop on your podcast. Why did you start your podcast? And you're at probably over 400 episodes now. How did you get it going and keep it going so long? And what have been the benefits for you in all aspects?
Yeah, we're over 400 episodes now. I launched the podcast for two reasons. And I did not think through this as well as I should have, but I launched it for two reasons. One reason was I wanted to be able to connect with other investors, and I needed to have a platform to do that. So I initially started with the blog. I realized that I didn't know how to write a blog.
And it's time consuming.
It's time consuming. I'm a pretty good writer, but I didn't understand the concept of, like, crafting a blog, right? I would just write about anything. And like, it didn't even, there was no story, there was no, like, in game, nothing. So I just realized the blog thing wasn't working. And my coach had a podcast, a very successful podcast. And I said, okay, you know what? People say you have a great voice. I used to want to be a radio DJ, and I saw how much they made out of college. I'm like, nope. But that's what I wanted to do. I knew I had a good voice, and I thought that would be a great way to meet and connect with people. So that was the one reason, particularly to help me raise capital. But the reason I launched Target Market Insights specifically was I was having a hard time trying to figure out what metrics to look for in different markets. My mentor was investing in Dallas. I was living in Chicago. When I looked at the deals I was doing, the deals they were doing, and the deals I would see other people post on Bigger Pockets and all these other websites, the numbers were way different in Chicago. We weren't even close to the stuff they were doing, particularly in the north side of Chicago. And then I started to look more in Ohio, Cincinnati market, and I didn't know, yes, Cincinnati, no Cincinnati, and then if Cincinnati, what part of Cincinnati? In Chicago, I lived there. I was at an agency. I worked with people who were renters. So I would ride the train. Like, you can get the vibe of the city. You can see where the new restaurant is. You can understand what schools people want to go to, or why they like the brown line more than the red line. So all of that you can get a sense of, even if you had no data to back it up. And then if you pull up the data, it does back it up, right? I couldn't get that looking at other markets, and I had no clue how people were investing all over the country. So I launched Target Market Insights to help figure out how to invest in the best markets, how to identify the best markets, how to invest in them, but then also how to figure out the best sub-markets so that you could get ahead of the pack. One of the reasons I've been successful up to that point was I did a great job of figuring out where to invest. I invested in North Center of Chicago, which was the only neighborhood. There are 77 distinct Chicago neighborhoods. It was the only neighborhood that did not lose any value from 2008 to 2011. So for me, it was like, I don't know anything else about this neighborhood, but if the values didn't drop during this recession, it's got to be solid, right? Cool. And that was it. I made that neighborhood the only neighborhood we looked in. And we bought our first property. And like I said, we created a ton of value in a very short period of time. The next deal we did, we invested next to Logan Square in a neighborhood called Avondale. There was a new grocery store that was coming a little bit later. A lot of people went there. Rents shot up over the next couple of years. We made a lot of money on that deal. So I did a really good job of figuring out which neighborhoods are going to pop next. I had no clue figuring out how to do that in other cities. And this podcast helped me out doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because sometimes I think we rely too much on other people that we don't know as well for the other markets. And you need to figure out what the metrics are so you have something to tie to other than what somebody else is telling you, because they usually have a hand in a deal or something. And then, so you transitioned to Multifamily Insights. Was there a transition in the podcast itself, or you just felt yourself going more into like multifamily and then higher end commercial?
Yeah, a couple things that happened. One is I started to answer my initial question, right? How to find the best places to invest, how to identify the best submarkets. You have 30, 40, 50 episodes of that, and you start to get a lot of the same answers. So I felt like it wasn't giving the same value to me and our audience. So I wanted to expand. And the episodes that started to really intrigue me were more marketing related, marketing holistically, how to build a brand, how to use social media, what to look for in metrics when you're doing data analysis, market research, those kind of things. So I wanted to expand. So we did a soft transition where we called it Target Market Insights, the Multifamily and Marketing Show. That was a long title. So eventually we dropped all that and just went to Multifamily Insights. And the show really is about multifamily holistically. We do talk more about apartment investing and syndication, but we do also cater to smaller multifamily investors as well. And if you're looking to raise money for deals or build out a personal brand so you can attract capital, we do cover a lot of those things on our show.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. One last question. This podcast, mine, was started to help people figure out a more mindful approach to real estate investing. So for new investors or experienced investors, because they get lost in it too, what's one piece of advice based on your experience that you could give that would help them have a more mindful real estate investing journey to just make it a little bit easier for them?
Yeah, I would definitely say focus on your goals. And what I mean by that is, where do you want to be 5, 10 years from now? You know, do you want to be an active investor? Do you want to have a big portfolio of properties that you self-manage? Do you want to have your own property management company, construction company? Do you just want to be sitting on the beach, sipping Mai Tais, while you get passive income, right? And then once you're clear on that, make sure your decisions are helping you move in that direction. And that was the mistake I made on the flips. Yes, the flips could have helped me generate more money, but I would have been better off investing passively myself in multifamily, because the goal was to grow a multifamily portfolio. Yeah. So doing everything multifamily would have been a better move than trying to flip properties, because it just really took up a lot of time. It got me sidetracked, cost me money. And even if I invested passively, guess what? We talked about credibility and confidence. If I'm going to start raising money from investors, it sounds way better for me to tell them I have invested passively and this is working for me, and I want to invite you to join me on the next opportunity I see, right? That sounds so much better than, hey, I've never done a multifamily deal, but I'm getting ready to do this first one. Don't you want to
try to mess it up together?
Right.
Yeah.
So make sure you're taking steps in the direction you actually want to go. And if you just want the money and you want to be passive, then just go passive. Like, why are you doing this other stuff? So just be really clear on your goals so that you are moving towards that goal and not just doing busy work.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like people sometimes get stuck on themselves. They make a goal 1 year and then they think they can't change it. Oh, my 5-year goals. Like, you can still change them, but like, it's important to keep setting them out and then readdressing each year and see, okay, am I still on the same trajectory for this goal, or do I want to adjust a little instead of be so tight on it? But you have to have them out there, or else you're just going to be very short-sighted. You're going to be like one deal focused. Not every deal is going to go perfect. So you have to really figure out what's going to work. Have you felt like over all the time that you've been in real estate, the more mindful you get with each deal and take it like more like a holistic approach to this is part of a bigger diversified portfolio, it makes it easier to judge deals than it was in the beginning when I just need to get one deal done. It's so exciting. But have you found that has gotten easier as you've just had more experience?
It gets easier, and I think you just get more clarity on what a deal means to you, right? Just because you can make a 12% return or a 20% return doesn't mean it's a deal for you, right? You have to understand, what are you willing to deal with market-wise, location-wise, resident-base-wise, partner-wise, time frame-wise. All those things matter. So that's why your goals really have to be important. And then, as you said, every year that's going to change. So we're at a point where we like to focus on deals where the property itself is sound. We've invested in older assets where we're constantly putting money into them and constantly addressing plumbing and other issues. And those just aren't the assets we're interested in investing in today. I don't care how much money we can make on it, because I think they're harder to manage. You typically get a rougher resident base, and it's more management intensive. So that's just not what we want to do. And that's what we've learned. So as we look at our goals and what's a deal for us, we want to invest in areas and locations where there's strong demand, because there's going to be strong demand on the back end too. If it's an area or market where people want to live and people want to own, that typically means prices are going to go up and valuations are going to go up. So we'd rather do that so we have a little less risk in a deal. I think if you buy in rougher areas where you're going to full gut rehab it, that's great. But you also have to ask yourself, who's going to buy it from you when you're done? Yeah. If you're buying in rough areas, the only people who are going to buy it from you are people who are looking for deals. Yeah. Right? And those people are not going to pay a premium for it.
Exactly. You're doing the process backwards there. Amazing. John, I really appreciate your time. Where is the best way, or what is the best way for people to get in touch with you? I know your website, casmoncapital.com, that's a big one, but are there any other places where you interact with folks the most?
Yeah, on the website, we've got a sample deal package. You can check that out, casmoncapital.com/sample deal. There, you'll get a chance to see what a deal looks like. So if you're thinking about, again, scaling your portfolio, maybe going active, maybe raising money, this will give you some great insights and tips of things you may want to include when you're looking at a deal. And if you want to be passive, it's great too, because there's terminology and deal structure and stuff that maybe you haven't seen before. So this will give you a chance to wrap your head around it. So as you're looking at deals and opportunities, you know what to look for. So you can check that at casmoncapital.com/sample deal. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So if you want to go on LinkedIn, John Casmon, you can find me there.
LinkedIn's great. People really don't think it's great. It's great. It's where all the professionals are.
Yeah, and I think it's best suited for this. So people reach out to me on Facebook. I don't really use Facebook that often. And when I do, it's more family type stuff. So I don't know, I don't really like using. It's a little clunky for me too. I agree. But, it used to be super simple, and I'm like, I don't even know how to find what I'm looking for anymore on Facebook.
Takes too long. What was the third one? I know you're going to say something else.
The third was just the podcast. If you like this show, definitely check out Jonathan's episode, but it's called Multifamily Insights. It's available anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's great information, and if you enjoyed this, I think you'd enjoy this show as well.
I can confirm they definitely will, because I was like a really big fan of your podcast listening, and then I was honored to come on. I loved our conversation, so I really appreciate you coming on here so we can do that back and forth for each other. But I appreciate your time. I always like talking to you, and thanks for sharing your insight over the years with all of these guests of ours today.
Jonathan, thank you for having me. Great conversation, and look forward to staying in touch with you.
Yeah, me too, John. All right. Thanks so much. This has been episode 17 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, John Casmon of Casmon Capital. We'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with me, Jonathan Green. And I just want to remind you, and this is always an uncomfortable part, I don't want you to think that I'm begging for you to like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you have to do for the podcast, leave a 5-star review. But if you like the podcast and you think it adds value in the real estate investing sphere, then just do me a personal favor. Like the podcast, follow it, share it when you can with your friends, and be so kind as to write a 5-star review if you believe it deserves a 5-star review up against what else is out there. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you keep listening.